Alright, it is day 11 of the Silent Movie Marathon 2, and without any further ado, this is going to be the epic I'm tackling today. D.W. Griffith's Intolerance, or, Intolerance, Love Struggle Throughout the Ages. Brilliant front cover there, another Eureka Massive Cinema release, and this is D.W. Griffith's follow-up to Birth of a Nation. This came out in 1916, a year following his terrible masterpiece, as it was put, and obviously at the time it was much more well received as this great film, and no one really questioned the racial issues within Birth of a Nation, though some people did, and there was an outrage that was sparked because of Birth of a Nation, and so many people kind of see Intolerance as D.W. Griffith's response to his naysayers and his critics over Birth of a Nation in terms of the way he portrayed the black people in that film and the Ku Klux Klan, stuff like that. So I believe this is a much more family-friendly kind of story in a way, in terms of just like, it doesn't really paint him to be, a racist, basically, I guess. I don't know what I'm trying to say with that really, but let's just read a little off the back before we get into it. After shaking the world with his, I'll probably sum it up better than I have. After shaking the world with his hugely controversial epic The Birth of a Nation, pioneer filmmaker D.W. Griffith spared no expense in putting together his next project, a powerful examination of intolerance as it has persisted throughout civilizations, set across 4 parallel storylines that span 2,500 years. There is the Babylonian story, depicting nothing less than the fall of Babylon, the Judean story, which revolves around the crucifixion of Christ, the French story, which presents the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in all its horror, and a modern American story of class struggle, crime, and the plight of life in the early 20th century set within urban slums and the prison system. So it's starring such luminaries as Lillian Gish, Constance Talmadge, and Miriam Cooper, who share screen time with enormous main cast and some 3,000 extras. Griffith's film, the most expensive motion picture ever produced at the time, went on to become a critical success whose influence has only grown in the decades since. So, yeah, when I say family-friendly, I just, that's not really the right term to use, but, it's not one that kind of struck up outrage like Birth of a Nation did, and it kind of, he didn't go back to his roots of what he kind of thinks the whole American Civil War was, the aftermath of it, the Reconstruction of the South was all about, which from what I can gather, he got very, very wrong in Birth of a Nation. But I'm excited to check this out, even more so knowing that he is such a great filmmaker from seeing Birth of a Nation technically, and I don't have to worry about kind of my morals in terms of enjoying this one if it turns out to be great in any way. So yeah, let's check it out. One, I guess, note I can get out of the way before we get to the film. It has 2 Blu-ray discs, and on the second Blu-ray disc it has a bonus feature, but also it has 2 other feature films, but they're companion films to Intolerance, and they're called The Fall of Babylon and The Mother and the Law, expanding upon these 2 storylines from Intolerance presented in high definition, but I believe those 2 are just recut and kind of shorter. The film's nearly 3 hours long, so I'm guessing around 90 minutes or, an hour and 10, hour and 20 minutes each, so smaller features from the main feature kind of thing, that focus on one of the 4 storylines that spans the whole thing. So I'm not too sure if they have extra footage or anything like that, but either way I won't be doing those in this, and this is film number, I think, 26 now in the marathon. Okay, let's just get on with it. Which I've said a hell of a lot in the past couple of weeks, but yeah, let's get on with it. Alright, if there's one thing that's excited me about this film, it's been this shot. This staggering shot from the film. I mean, just look at it. Look at the scale of this thing. Got all the people down there, all extras, and then you just got this massive set. And this is 1916, again, the most expensive film made ever at this point. It just blows my mind seeing shit like this, and I can't wait to see how it's incorporated into the film. Anyway, let's just get on with it. Enough blabbering. Time to watch the film. So I'm about halfway through, just over halfway through actually, the film, and struggling to keep awake at this point. I'm kind of just jolting up. It's not because it's boring, I'm just didn't get enough sleep last night, I suppose, but it's getting exciting now. This bit is reminding me of Return of the King a little bit, the battle at the end, the battle of the Pelennor Fields in a way. Big towers and big gates that has to be opened by multiple people and stuff. But yeah, this is a big battle that's going down in the Babylonian section of the film, and they cut between the four timelines pretty quickly, and I feel like it doesn't really work that much for me. Just trying to read the intertitles as I'm doing this. I probably won't film for very long, but oh my god, the scale of some of these sets is incredible. Okay, here's what I meant about Return of the King. If you can, it's got the elephants as well. I wonder if that was an influence on the way Peter Jackson laid out Return of the King. See? Yeah, this is pretty damn spectacular, I have to say. But it's just a weird juxtaposition to have stuff like this and then like just a simple drama tale of a woman in present day who gives birth to a little baby. Her husband gets sent off to prison wrongfully, just because, you know, he gets caught up with the wrong people and he decides to stop doing bad things, and they decide to chuck him in jail and plant false stolen stuff on him. So this woman, and she's just called I forget what she's called now, but she isn't given a name in the film. She's just the dear one, just the dear one, and her husband is just the boy. So yeah, she gets her child taken off her by these just women who basically want to control society and stop people from dancing, having fun, and doing anything that's kind of untoward in terms of their perception. Jesus Christ! Oh god, the ladders are coming down now. Holy shit! This battle scene is intense. But yeah, so far, I mean, just the four timelines. I mean, the French one, I bet you've barely seen anything from the French one, from the 1500s. And the similarities in look and tone and everything with the Jesus era section and the Babylonian section is pretty similar. So I'm like, oh, is this the Babylonian, or was it Jerusalem? Oh, there's Jesus, the guy with the beard and long hair and the white robe. So yeah, I guess it's. But yeah, this battle scene's pretty nuts actually. So I should just continue watching, and then come back at the end, I guess, unless anything else monumental happens I need to talk about. Wow, so Griffith seemed to have quite a flair for realism in these battles. Some quite gory stuff with knives going into bodies and things, and then there's a shot of a guy getting his head lopped off with a sword, and it was done so well. Like, even when I rewound it back and looked, like, they made a proper great prosthetic head. Oh my god, they're using fire now. Jesus Christ. I mean, there's some stunts in this that would make Buster Keaton cringe. And I read that I think like 60 people got injured in one day once on these war scenes because they were getting so into it and stuff. Okay, so that whole battle scene closed the first act of the film. Yeah, so on with Act 2. You know, I'm enjoying the stuff as it's coming, but I'm not too sold on the 4 storylines thing, really, and it's just so dense with characters, it's hard to really keep up with everything. Alright, okay. Intolerance love struggle through the ages. D.W. Griffith's 1916 epic. A little note on the film, or a few notes on the film before we get started on my full thoughts on this epic 167-minute long film, 2 hours 47 minutes. For those of you who can't add up, I guess. Yeah, it was actually, the film began filming before Birth of a Nation came out in 1914, and it was a film called The Mother and the Law. D.W. Griffith was filming this. It was meant to be like an epic social drama about a woman and her husband and just their struggles against oppression in society and things like that. And then he had to finish Birth of a Nation, so he continued focusing on that. And then when he came back to The Mother and the Law, he thought, why don't I expand upon this and add 3 more stories of similar kind of, you know, tales of oppression and intolerance. And so he came up with the idea of filming the what was it, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre from the 1500s, I believe, in all its horror. He had the idea of showing the crucifixion of Christ in the Judean era, and then also the fall of Babylon. And so he set to work filming those in the end of 1915, and then through January to April of 1916, sorry, he filmed the Babylon stuff. So he did make, in a way, 4 little films. Well, not 4 little films, but they're quite big, especially the Babylon film. But so he had 4, and then he edited them together. Now Lillian Gish, who stars in this film, she starred in Birth of a Nation too. You know, legendary screen actress, and she's in this film. I think I've already said that. Jesus Christ, there's a lot to get through, and there's a lot I will not be able to cover in this film. But Lillian Gish, in her biography, said that she was kind of following, you know, Griffith as he was editing Intolerance, and at one point his intent was for this to be an 8-hour film and to be screened over 2 nights with 2 4-hour portions. But he had to edit it down to about 2.5 hours, 3 hours long. And Lillian Gish said it was too tight. It was you know, it didn't give the story enough time with all the 4, you know, plot lines, or 4, you know, ages in a way. And I think that is where I stand with Intolerance. I think it doesn't quite work. It's shot fantastically well. You know, you're definitely seeing a master at work here. As I was saying earlier, you know, people say that this is kind of an apology for Birth of a Nation, but in fact I was reading something in the booklet that says that Griffith didn't want to apologise for Birth of a Nation. If anything, he wanted to, you know, in a way, almost make this as a kind of a comeback to people who found Birth of a Nation so, you know, morally questionable, because he feels like, you know, you shouldn't be intolerant of other people's views, and in his mind, you know, Birth of a Nation is his view. So yeah, I guess it's worth looking into, and not just thinking this as some kind of, you know, Griffith going, wow, I can't believe I made Birth of a Nation, that was horrible, let's make a better film that doesn't have racist themes in it. So yeah, I think that definitely, and again, going back to when I watched the 1930 re-release kind of introduction with Griffith, where he was kind of, again, talking lovingly about his mother sewing a Ku Klux Klan robe and stuff, I could tell very much that Griffith was a product of growing up in that era, in the late 1800s, where, you know, that was just the way it was, you know. Anyway, let's not get into the whole racism issue again, you know, because it's just this murky waters, you know, and you can just get into a minefield of offending people and things like that. But yeah, this film doesn't have any of that in terms of, you know, the outright racism and things like that. But it just paints people in a really bad light, and there are really bad people out there. So, you know, I'm not saying that it's unrealistic or anything like that, but yeah, it's just a hard film to sit through, because in essence you're watching, you know, just hours and hours of just good people with, you know, not very much to their name in terms of wealth and status, just being trodden down repeatedly to heartbreaking degrees, you know. And so in that sense it's a difficult watch, but I did, you know, marvel at the spectacle, you know. And one of the kind of, well, the most famous shot of the entire film is the Babylon set in all its glory, and you see that in the beginning of part 2. They're celebrating their victory of that battle I kind of showed a little bit of the beginning of part 2, and they're celebrating that, you know, Babylon's the best, and, you know, they're having orgies and stuff. There's women lying around naked, and, you know, it's quite, you know, it's a PG rated here on the Blu-ray. It says mild violence and sex references, even though you've got, well, I guess, you know, you don't, they're not completely naked. You just see, like, they're in see-through clothes and stuff. But yeah, the most famous shot of this film is this right here, which is unbelievable, because this is all real. It's all real. I mean, just take a closer look if you've never seen this. You probably have. It's one of the great images of cinema history. And I feel like this shot just kind of, once you get to this shot, that's kind of it. You know, well, not kind of it, but I mean, you can't beat this. You know, the wonder that you get watching this is an emotion that doesn't get topped by anything else in the film, except maybe the final moments of the modern story. But I mean, you just see all the people down there. It was just the biggest set I've ever seen in my life, and, you know, it was once in a lifetime. 1916, never before, never again. You will never see a set of this size and magnitude ever again in the history of film, in my opinion, because you can just do it digitally, and you can do it brilliantly, and no one will even notice. But to know that it's real adds so much weight to it, you know. And yeah, my main problem was for the film was just the way the four stories intersected. You know, you got the modern story, you got the French story, 1500s, I believe, the story of Jesus in Jerusalem, and then you have the Babylon story, which is, you know, way back, like 2,500 years, something like that. So jumping between like different timelines, different, you know, settings, you know, it can be a bit jarring. And I didn't quite feel like the theme of, okay, we're seeing intolerance through the ages really kind of worked that well for me. The French story, dud. It was a dud. The final moments of it, when you see the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, were very effective, and, you know, wow, you know, some horrific stuff going on. You know, the scenes were done very well, but the build up to it was just, I can't think of, Brown Eyes was a girl in the story, that was it, and Prosper or something was the guy who loved her, I think. I mean, it was really French light, you know, in this film. I mean, it felt like there'd be an hour, and then it would cut back to the French story, and it's like, oh yeah, that's happening. It was really underdeveloped in this cut anyway. I mean, I know there's like a 3.5 hour cut, and this is the, again, 2 hour 47-minute cut. I'm not sure. It says in the book that this is the most complete version, but I'm sure well, not just me be corrected, but I'm sure the people who wrote this book could be corrected. I've heard there's many different versions of Intolerance, but I'm guessing for now this is the one that is the most complete and in high definition and stuff like that. And a lot of it looks fantastic, by the way. A few shots are a bit grainier, a bit dimmer, but a lot of them are really crisp and clear and just look fantastic. Especially the scenes in Babylon, you're just like, oh my god, it's wonderful. And the Jesus Christ story, you know, it's probably even, I don't know if it's even worse than the French one in terms of not having much to even put in the film, but it kind of is more interesting because you know the story of Christ. You know, oh, he's turning water into wine and things like that, and him lugging the cross, you know, through the streets. But honestly, it felt like there wasn't anything from the Jesus story for about 40 minutes. And then we get a shot of just suddenly, oh, here's Jesus holding the cross and walking down the streets, and people are, you know, shouting him and stuff, and that was it. And then there's another half hour goes by, and then we cut back, and he's still walking through the streets. About a 10-second shot, then back again, and then you just see at the end the crucifixion, you know, from a distance, and that's it. It was just like, I felt like, why include it? You know, it felt like Griffith had two great films on his hands, and he tried to make one out of two of them, and he tried to make one out of the one he already had by making 3 others and then putting them all together to make this one big epic, but then you had to condense it down and cut it down, and it didn't quite work. Yeah, for me, it's a flawed epic. The Babylon, the side of it, was great. I mean, the mountain girl main character was a bit of an interesting one for me. She wasn't very likable, you know, as kind of the heroine of the story. She just kind of was just a bit of a bitch, really, you know. I just didn't really like her character that much. You know, I mean, it was cool seeing her kind of be going against the stereotype of a woman, but not only in those days, but I guess in the 1900s, but in the early 1900s, like, you know, 1916, to have kind of like a tough, badass woman, you know, but her character wasn't that likable. And then you have all the kings and stuff like that, and I can't remember half of their names, and they just kind of all blend together. They all look fairly similar and things like that. But I mean, the spectacle of it and just the story of this big kingdom kind of having a massive battle against another kingdom that wants to take them down and be the top dog in the world, and, you know, the Babylon wins, and then they kind of rest on their laurels and they celebrate and have orgies and parties and stuff like that, and then they kind of, you know, they're betrayed, and then another big battle comes at the end, and you see the fall of Babylon. And I liked that. It was a very kind of epic, kind of old time period, epic scale kind of thing that I really liked. But the characters weren't. I mean, all the characters in the film really felt like as much set dressing as the epic sets were. You know, it almost felt like the characters were symbols more than people. I mean, the two characters that you get the most out of in the film are in the modern story from The Mother and the Law that was originally filmed in 1914. And it literally is, I forget her name now, it's like the dear one, the dear little one. You see this girl, and you know, you see her in an innocent time, and then she goes on and she, you know, she falls in love with the boy. He's just known as the boy, you know, and they get married, they have a kid, and the kid gets taken away because the boy gets wrongfully imprisoned, and then, you know, you see the people being intolerant of, you know, the dear one, and the girl. I should call her the girl. If he's called the boy, I can call her the girl. They become intolerant of the girl because they walk into her apartment and she's got a bottle of whiskey because she's got a cold and she's trying to cure herself. And they're like, oh, you're drinking with a kid, right? That's it. We're taking your baby, and then just take a baby, and that's it. See ya, you know. And yeah, it's just so frustrating to watch. I mean, but I thought that the mother-in-law, or the present day story in this film, was probably the best. And I thought to myself, I just want to see that film, you know. And the Babylon stuff, I just want to see that film, you know, and mix them together. What I mean, I've got to give Griffith credit, even if I don't agree with his philosophies on life and his you know, his, I guess, skewed perception of morality and race and all that kind of stuff. I greatly respect his filmmaking technique and also his ambition with this project. It was so huge, and I've got to give him credit for that. And there are some great moments where it does work. Like towards the end, there's like a train steaming across in modern times, and it cuts between these people racing through the night on horses to get to Babylon. So it was used well. But I really feel like the Babylon stuff and the present day stuff in 1916 were the two strongest stories, and the French one just suffered from not being in it enough, being underdeveloped in terms of the, you know, the whole film. I don't know how much he shot of that stuff. Again, if he was thinking about an 8-hour cut, there must be so much more footage that was shot and is probably now lost. And then, of course, the Jesus stuff, which I just thought was, it didn't really work into it for me. I feel like it just was laying it a bit too thick. And I feel like overall maybe the film was laying it on a bit too thick with the intolerance theme and, you know, just good people just getting trodden down repeatedly. Feel sorry for them. This is intolerance. I mean, the word intolerant and intolerance is used in the intertitles all the way through the film. It's just, in case you didn't get it, this is someone being intolerant. This is, you know, the intolerance is being weaved through her life. You know, yeah, we get it, you know. And then the ending was very, you know, spoilers. You can skip forward a few minutes if you want. Very sickly sweet, you know. You got all these angels in the sky and people on a battlefield and stopping and looking up and being like, oh. And then like a prison is transformed into a field of blossoming flowers and love conquers all. And it's just like, you painted such a realistic and horrible depiction of like the dark side of humanity here, and then you just kind of cop out at the end and say, well, love will conquer all, you know. I didn't like that. Wasn't a fan of the ending. But I did like the ending of the mother-in-law section, but that was kind of like an epilogue that was not even relevant to the other four parts of the film. It was just like a random battle and kind of saying, how terrible is war? There's angels and ghosts flying through the skies and a big see-through balloon dropping flowers on people, and yeah, didn't like that at all really. Overall, I think I would give this film an 8 out of 10, purely on the strength of the mother-in-law segments, just the sheer scale and artistry in the Babylon sequences. And yeah, overall as a film, I don't think it quite works the way it should. You know, and overall from start to finish, again, as a film, as a complete narrative, I'd probably give it like a 5 or a 6, to be honest. But I did really enjoy just the technical sides of it. And, you know, I guess that might not be the best reasons for giving films, you know, higher ratings, but, you know, and there were some great performances in the film, especially the woman who plays the girl in the mother-in-law story, because she was in Birth of a Nation as Flora Cameron, I believe, and I really liked her in that, and she was great in this, particularly the shot when she finds out that her husband is going to be wrongfully, you know, put on death row and be hanged for, you know, killing someone he didn't even kill. And I won't spoil if he does get hanged at the end, but there's a very tense moment at the end where it's a race to kind of prove that he's innocent, basically. And that was brilliant. That was really, really great. And there are some moments of absolute sheer brilliance in the film, just not overall, you know, I didn't feel. But yeah, the great shot of her when she comes back to her flat and just this close-up on her face. And it was just haunting. It really was. When she comes to that realization that, you know, my child has been taken away from me. You know, my husband has come back from prison where he was wrongfully, you know, put there, and now he's going to be killed for something he didn't do. you know, just that absolute sheer despair, raw, you know, level. Really, yeah, awesome stuff. But overall, like, you know, and that's what I want to get to now. This Blu-ray contains, and I think it's in high definition. Yeah, it is on a Blu-ray disc. I'd have to look into it. I don't think there's even a review of this Blu-ray out yet. But on the second Blu-ray disc of this, we have The Fall of Babylon and The Mother and the Law. So basically, they're the companion feature films. As I said earlier, I didn't know whether they were just like, he cut the segments out and just put them in order. But apparently, in 1919, he released The Mother and the Law and The Fall of Babylon as two separate movies. He filmed new things for both of them. Well, I think he just filmed one scene for The Mother and the Law, but he filmed some other stuff for The Fall of Babylon. I think they're both around an hour 20, hour and a half. So, I would love to see those. I don't think I can stomach them in this marathon now, because I'm nearing the finish line, and I just feel like adding another 3 hours into it might not be the best thing. I don't know, maybe madness will take over me and I'll do it, but, you know, I'm really interested to see them as separate films and see if they hold up, and maybe that would be, you know, a preferable version of Intolerance for me to watch those two instead. Because again, overall with the full stories, I don't think it really ultimately worked as well as it could have. But again, I give Griffith credit for having the ambition and the scope to go for it, and to get the money together to put something like this together was just unbelievable, you know, figuratively unbelievable. So yeah, I give it an 8 out of 10, I think. Just, as I said, I've already said why, you know, Mother-in-Law stuff, Babylon stuff, great, you know, even if the characters in the Babylon didn't really engage me in any way, I was taken away by the spectacle of it. So there we go, Intolerance. Love struggle throughout the ages, Luke's struggle throughout the film. It was a slog to get through, but rewarding in the end. And yeah, there we go. That's that for now, and we'll move on with a couple of other films, I think, tonight. All right, next, continuing on with the Buster Keaton short films collection, and there's actually two more. I didn't realise. I thought there was only one more, but the one of the two that I haven't seen yet is that we're going to watch now. Connie's joining me once again. We've got Dinner, Chicken Tikka Masala. You've seen it before, and well, I haven't seen this before. Buster Keaton in.
And I do know how to cook other things.
Okay.
Tikka Masala.
Just wanted to add that clarification in there.
Yeah.
And we're going to watch The Balloonatic. Get it? Because it's like the balloon and lunatic. The Balloonatic. So I wonder if there's going to be like a balloon and a lunatic in the film at the same time. Maybe even a lunatic on a balloon. I don't know, we'll see. Alright, Buster Keaton's The Balloonatic done. There wasn't a lunatic in it, but there was a balloon. So it delivered on half the title, at least.
He's the lunatic.
Yeah, he is the lunatic, really, but it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Not a great one, but not a below average one. I mean, it was enjoyable. There's some good gags in it and stuff. Dragged a little at times, but otherwise, you know, just a decent 20-minute short. As Connie was just saying after we watched the film, like the film, it opens with him in this kind of like haunted house. There's like a skeleton in a closet. There's Satan in a room, and then this big monster thing, and then he falls through a trapdoor, and then you find out he's in this like a what would you even call it? Like a yeah, but like a public attraction. You know, you pay 10 cents and you go into the haunted house, the haunted mine, and this is like a little gag of him getting thrown off the, you know, down the chute and out into the street basically, and then he goes on, and then the film basically starts with the balloon. So it's just like a really random opening, you know, segment, and then he comes across this guy who's about to take off on the hot air balloon, an explorer, and for some reason he climbs onto the top of the balloon, and no one notices, and then the balloon takes off without the explorer in it, and then Buster kind of crashes the balloon in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness, and that's when the majority of the film takes place, and he's just kind of like using all the stuff that was with the balloon, like there's like a little boat and stuff you can put together, and he tries fishing and things like that, and then there's a woman who's living out there in a tent kind of thing, and I guess kind of the central gag of the film is that she's more of a man than he is, basically. Like there's this great bit where this bull with massive horns is like staring down at her, and it's gonna like attack her, and so Buster runs over with his gun, and then he starts firing water out of his gun because his gun's knackered, and then he can't sorted out, and then by the time he actually gets her to help out, she's wrestled the bull to the ground herself, which I thought was pretty funny. And the ending was really cool as well, like a cool kind of visual sight gag that was great. But yeah, overall, decent, maybe 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, something like that. Anything you want to add?
No.
In case you didn't hear that, her response was, nah. So yeah, almost as you almost put that as well as Buster does in his films, silently. Yeah, so that was that one, and I'll probably watch the last one tomorrow, because tomorrow should be the final day of this whole thing. So there we go. That's it for now. The Balloonatic. Alright, we've been through Love Struggle Through the Ages, we've been through a Buster Keaton short film, and now it's time to round off the Wizard of Oz collection and watch the final Oz silent film from 1925, The Wizard of Oz, and that'll be the final film tonight. And so tomorrow will be day 12, and there's a lot more to cover, so I'm going to have to go balls to the wall tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it. So here we go, Wizard of Oz. Okay, I've just woken up, I've had a shower, I've had a shave, and I didn't have a third S, so that's something. But yes, today is day 12. What is the date? Let's get the date up for posterity. The 17th of September 2015. It's time for day 12 of Silent Movie Marathon 2, the end of the Odyssey. An Odyssey of intertitles, 12 Days of Silence, whatever I'm going to call this thing. It's been a journey so far, and today it's going to get even bigger. Because, over the past 2 weeks, I've been watching, maybe 1, 2, sometimes 3, silent films a day. Today I'm going to go out with a bang. 15 films. 15 films. Yes, you heard that right. A lot of them are short films, but there's about 3 or 4 like feature-length ones, including one that's 2.5 hours long. So it's doable, and so I'm going to do it because it's doable, and it's going to end this thing on a bang. I think I'll probably have then rounded off every silent film I own, in terms of things that are bonus features on Blu-rays and stuff. There might be a couple that I'm missing out, I don't know. But anyway, right. Last night I watched the final Wizard of Oz silent film as presented as a bonus feature on the 1939 Wizard of Oz Blu-ray. And so the Wizard of Oz from 1925 was interesting. It started off great, it felt more like a substantial film as opposed to the other 3, well the other 4 I suppose, which seemed in rougher shape and didn't have too much elegance to them. They were fun and everything, but the 1925 version was much more polished in terms of like the intertitles were beautiful, and painterly, and the tinting was grey and the sets were great, and I really just enjoyed the look of the film. But it basically follows a more traditional, or as far as I know anyway, it more follows this film. Not that, again, it came before that film, but it's more in keeping with the film that we all know and love. Most of us should love it anyway, because it's a great film. But it has Dorothy, it has a house or a shed at least being swept off in a tornado to the land of Oz. It has the Tin Man, it has the Cowardly Lion, it has the Scarecrow, and it has the Wizard of Oz. But it's not quite how you would expect it to go down. Now Dorothy is a side character in this. You have Auntie M, you have all the stuff that you associate with this film, but apart from Toto actually. But really, the film is about the director. The director is Larry Seaman. I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but it looks like lemon, but with an S. So I'm not going to say Larry Seaman. I just did. Shit. Well, anyway, Larry Seaman, who was he was in his mid-30s when he made this, and he died a few years later actually, from illness. But he seemed to be like like a lower rent kind of Chaplin, Keaton, Lloyd hybrid. One of those kind of comedians who does like sight gags and stuff like that. And from what I understand, he grew up in a vaudevillian kind of childhood and environment growing up, so it's understandable that's what he did. And again, like Oliver and Hardy, did I say Oliver and Hardy? Laurel and Hardy. Oliver Hardy is in this film. He plays a farmhand who later becomes the Tin Man, because yes, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion are just 3 of the people from the farm in Kansas who get swept off to Oz, and they end up inside the outfit. So they're not really the Scarecrow, they're not really the Tin Man, they're not really the Cowardly Lion. And I almost feel like the Cowardly Lion was a homage to the earlier silent films, because it looks like the fluffy suits that you saw in the early films. from 1914, 1910. So yeah, Dorothy and some of the farmhands, they get swept off to Oz, and basically Dorothy is the Queen of Oz, and when she was a baby, this evil Prime Minister Cruel sent her off to Kansas so he could rule the land of Oz, basically. But there's a letter that was given to her, and so she opens it and finds out she's the Queen of Oz. She goes there and stuff, and then basically the director, Larry Salmon, his character doesn't even have a name, but he just put himself as the main star of the show. It's about him and his love for Dorothy, and you just see him just doing slapstick for like an hour, basically. Well, not an hour, I'm exaggerating, but at least 30 to 40 minutes of the film revolves around him. And why? Where's his character besides the guy that just, oh, he's got egg on his face, he just, I didn't. I appreciated his talents as a comedian, but I don't think it fit within this film. It felt like he was trying to shoehorn himself into a Wizard of Oz film, and I didn't like that very much. And again, Dorothy just became a side character, and you didn't really know that much about her, really. Well, I guess you don't really need to, but I mean, she didn't have hardly any screen time, Oliver Hardy was great as, the other guy who was vying for Dorothy's attentions and competing with Larry Salmon. There's some great stunts in this, like, they do this stunt where they both fall off the top of this massive tower in the farm, and I mean, they did it for real. I mean, obviously there's a big like inflatable underneath or something, but like really massive jumps off big heights and things like that. Like some really great stunts, I will say, and I did enjoy a lot of the physical humor. It dragged a little bit at times. But one thing I hated was there's a whole sequence in Oz in the dungeons where there's like a live lion, and they kind of work around the gag that there's the black guy, the black farmhand who comes along. The first shot you see him in the film, he's sat there eating a watermelon, and it says the case of a melancholic, which I found quite funny. But the film kind of just painted this little black. There's me saying that little black. Well, I guess that's the film's influence. It kind of, it just shows to you that, oh, this is the black worker. He's got no brains. He's just a scaredy cat, and isn't good for anything. I mean, he gets struck by lightning in the head, and he doesn't even notice it. He just stands there like grinning, to show that he's brain dead almost. It was like shocking racism, really. But I actually liked his performance. I thought he was very good, the way he was like jumping around and stuff. And even though he was being painted in a bad light as a race, I felt like he did a good physical performance in the film. And there's like a whole gag where he's puts on the Cowardly Lion suit, and so Larry Salmon, who's dressed as the Scarecrow, he thinks that it's the guy in the suit, but it's actually the real lion, and so he kicks the real lion in the face, and the real lion starts attacking him. And I really hated it because he kicked the real lion in the face for real. Now he didn't boot it, he didn't do any long-lasting damage. He didn't kick it, he didn't give it a proper clout, but nonetheless, he gave him a quick stamp on the nose, and I just thought, you don't need to do that. That was too much, and for me, that kind of just takes a lot out of the film for me. When I see something like that, that's so unnecessary when you don't need to do it. I mean, it's kind of bad enough that they're probably locked up and made to kind of perform on camera and stuff like that in films like that. But I just thought that was taking it a bit too far. I mean, it's not extreme, but I just didn't like it. I personally wasn't comfortable with it. But anyway, overall, I think the film just kind of fell short, and it was a shame because it clearly had money behind it. It clearly had some great sets and stuff, and different locations, color tinting, and the interstars looked great and all that. I loved how the whole film was framed with this kind of toy maker telling his young daughter the story of the Wizard of Oz, and he had the book there and even said the author on it and stuff. So it's like a nice kind of framing device for the whole film. But ultimately, I give maybe like a 6 out of 10 because the kick in the line just really bugged me, and also I just think Larry Salmon kind of, his own ego got in the way here because he just kind of made himself the star of the show when he didn't really have a character, and that just seemed a bit too, didn't really sit too well with me. I might watch it again someday. I really loved seeing Oliver Hardy in this. He was great and physical, and I could almost imagine him saying some of the stuff as he's like shouting and things like that. I'm a big Laurel and Hardy fan. But anyway, Wizard of Oz 1925. Decent enough, but overall just doesn't quite cut it. So yeah, 6 out of 10 I'd say, like 3 stars out of 5. Maybe that's even being generous, I guess I did really enjoy a lot of the stunts and stuff, and there was some inventive camera work and effects and things like that. Yeah, I'll stick with 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5, it was very decent. Just a few things that kind of niggled me, one being the main part that he kind of took over the whole film with his own personality. Anyway, so that is the Wizard of Oz silent films done. I never thought I'd actually watch all of them, but I watched all 5 of them. I'm really glad. I guess there's 145, excuse me, 155, maybe 255, call that 3, I think now. I guess it's about 3-4 hours worth of silent stuff there, I guess. Anyway, I'll work it all out afterwards. Although some of the timing on IMDb and Wikipedia is different than on the Blu-ray. I don't know whether it's frame rate issues or whether it's different cuts, so I'm not sure about that, unfortunately.